Okay, week in review. So it came to the attention of those of us who have an attention span that Tucker Carlson was in Moscow. Now, those of us who know what has transpired these last few years with Tucker Carlson understood at that time that there can be only one reason he was in Moscow. Rumors started swirling that he was there to interview Vladimir Putin. As a backstory, I think in 2021, before the war started, before the special military operation started, I should say, because the war started in 2014. That is a fact. Before this phase of the war started in Ukraine, I believe, or right around that time, Tucker Carlson had actually arranged, when he was still working for Fox News, to have an interview with Vladimir Putin. And what transpired thereafter should have alarmed any American. U.S. intelligence, I'm assuming the NSA, scooped up his emails. Not just his emails with people overseas, from what I understand, but all of his emails. Don't quote me on that, though. And then leaked his emails to the press. I guess some email where he said something uncouth in order to try to blackmail him into not doing the interview. A journalist was trying to do an interview with a world leader of a country we are not at war with, and U.S. Intel directly scooped up his emails, okay, and then tried to strong arm him into not doing it. And he was going to do it anyway, but Fox News came in and said no, because Fox News are a bunch of losers. Any American should be very concerned about that, should have been. But he now is independent, and I'm sure this was a goal from the beginning. I'm sure this has been in the works for a while, and he went and did his interview with Vladimir Putin. I watched it on Tucker Carlson News Network, but if we go to Twitter, which I can do right now, really quick, and we type in Tucker Carlson, and we go to his handle, and we look at the interview, he is at 185 million impressions, which is not necessarily a view, but you can extrapolate from that maybe, I would imagine, a portion of those, a significant portion, being actual people watching the video. Probably well over 100 million. In contrast, the Super Bowl tomorrow will probably get about 100 million views or viewers. This is Super Bowl numbers, and that's just Twitter. I was just looking at his YouTube channel, 12 million views. Who knows how many views were on the Tucker Carlson network? This is the one I watched it on, because why not? This is the, trying not to say too much. This is the website I share to people. I would imagine maybe 20, 30 million views on this. I think probably most people watched it on Twitter, because he's known as a Twitter guy now. I think you're talking somewhere in the realm of 200 million views if we include all the other platforms that this might be on. Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute. I'm sure he's not getting monetization for BitChute or Odyssey, or if he cares, if he even has a channel. Just think of the fact that for all people say bad about Vladimir Putin, for all of the shit people talk, most of whom know nothing about him, a lot of people sure want to hear him speak. And Vladimir Putin proceeded in the first half hour to give Tucker Carlson an exhaustive, detailed history of Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, as it relates to Ukraine, going back to the Varangians and even before the Varangians, even before Kievan Rus, the first Russian polity was established. And yes, the first Russian nation was established in the city of Kiev. It was called Kievan Rus. It was ruled by Vikings, actually, that were called Varangians. They established Kievan Rus as sort of a base with which they can sail down the Dnieper River to raid the very rich Byzantine Empire. And essentially, the Slavs of the region were fine with the Vikings ruling over them. And I think even Vladimir Putin explains it here. They invite the Varangians from Novograd to come down and establish themselves in that part of the world. And that became the first Russian nation. It's in Ukraine. He gives this exhaustive history for 30 minutes. I said right then and there, he lost most Americans right there. Thankfully, you can fast forward on this. I could just imagine Americans' eyes glazing over and a little sliver of drool coming out of their mouth as he went on and on. I found it fucking fantastic, but I know Americans. I am one. Americans hate history. Americans hate history because if you are to deep dive into history, you would have to acknowledge that America is neither exceptional nor especially remarkable. In some ways it is, but it is not this most remarkable nation of all time. And its existence on this planet may prove to be just a blip. We don't know in the vast scheme of things. Americans hate that. Americans don't want to read about the great civilizations of the world, China being number one on my list. They don't want to read about Rome because it reminds them too much of America, I think. And I noticed, with this first part of the interview, he seemed to talk with a sense of urgency and fervency. And he was breathing hard, and I could see his head glistening a little bit. And he got really testy because Tucker kept interrupting him and saying, "I'm not sure why this is relevant. I'm not sure why this is relevant." And he said, "Dude, I'm going to tell you this history. Shut the fuck up." Not in those words, obviously. He was very classy and diplomatic about it. I saw, many tweets about this where people are saying, here we have Putin who can recite 2,000 years. I think that's a bit of a stretch. He only did 1,500 years. But about 2,000 years of Russian history. And the same night, Biden goes on TV in this disastrous attempt to distract from the interview. Obviously, he went on TV just because of the interview. And he mixed up Mexico and Egypt. Americans should demand better. If you love this country, raise your fucking voice. The rest of the interview, he basically goes through exactly what happened in Ukraine, how it happened, all the way back from the fall of the Soviet Union, even before that. He gives you the whole history of Ukraine. Anybody who watches that has to come out, first of all, being impressed by the man's intellect, whether you like him or not. Being impressed by his demeanor. But I noticed, by the way, and I meant to say this, you could feel, I could sense this exasperation coming out of him. At first I thought it was anxiety. But it wasn't anxiety. It was exasperation and frustration. He knew he was talking to America. He was talking to America as you would a kid that you are very frustrated with, grabbing America by the collar and saying, "Listen to me, damn it!" He's obviously completely, as Alexander Mercurius said, don't want to steal anything from him, completely disillusioned with the United States and Europe. And I think most Russians are. And I think we're already past the point of no return. And while Americans were asleep, these incompetent leaders in D.C. and their incompetent professional managerial civil servant cocksuckers that carry water for them have destroyed any possibility of the United States and Europe having a normal relationship with Russia and maybe even China for a generation or more, while Americans were asleep, while they were having their bread and circuses, their beer and Super Bowl. That's what's been going on. And Putin really conveys that. At this point, what does he care? I saw Ben Shapiro. Pause it for a second. I like this one. Ben Shapiro. Two things can be true at once. Putin, a clever and able anti-American dictator, which he's not. He's not either of those things. Used the interview to falsely justify a barbaric invasion of a sovereign country. That's entirely subjective. And offered no off-ramp to a war he believes he is winning. Why should he offer an off-ramp to America? Because that's what he's talking about here. Ben Shapiro is saying, why doesn't he give us CIA people, because he is one, or Mossad or whatever, why doesn't he give us an off-ramp for the war that we started that we're now losing? What did I say to this? Because I had to tweet. Is it Putin's concern to offer an off-ramp for a proxy war that the United States and its allies started? The political problems that come with losing a war in disastrous fashion are their problems, not Putin's. And here we have a deep state grifter crying that Putin isn't handing the United States a palatable off-ramp. Well, pretty much, here's the issue. The United States, Ukraine is destroyed. They're going to take the L, and the United States is going to take the L. And there's nothing they can do about it. There's just nothing they can do about it. We can do about it, I should say. I've been watching Putin for my entire adult life. He talks about U.S. support for the separatists in Chechnya, which were terrorists. He talks about U.S. support for separatists in the Republic of Georgia. And I happen to know Americans who went there. It wasn't a secret. It's not going to change American public opinion. It's just, as someone said on one of the spaces, it's just another chink in the armor, another drop in the bucket. But every drop counts. But it was an amazing interview. I liked it. It's not for everybody, but I would recommend to anybody. It's on the map that I have posted on Twitter. It's on the map, and I would recommend anybody watch it if they just want to see the other side. Now, I don't even believe that everything Putin said was necessarily correct. I don't necessarily believe that. There were some things that were a bit iffy, if you ask me. But overall, it was a clear and concise argument that's difficult to counter. And they were scared of this interview in D.C. They were scared because when somebody's a bullshitter, let's say you have a female that you're dating, and she's a straight bullshitter. I've had this situation where a female that's a complete bullshitter said, "Oh, don't talk to my mother, don't talk to my brother," and really pressured me hard not to talk to any of these people. Why is that? Why could that be? Because she didn't want them to tell me aspects of her that she didn't want known. And it's the same dynamic here. We have a government and a political system that's basically nothing but bullshitters. And they have to keep their bullshit alive, but the only way they can do that is by trying to keep Americans from hearing the other side. It's easier, right, to be a bullshitter than actually do your job. I mean, if you can get away with just being a bullshitter, why would you actually do your job properly? And so far, and even up until this point, that's what the people in D.C. have been able to do. They've been able to be complete bullshitters. And that's why interviews like what Putin had with Tucker Carlson really unnerve them. So that's where I'm at with it. It's 2 hours. It's fantastic. We got some bass outside. Let me pause it for a second. We're going to go through the world news today. Let's see. This was a good one. Nikki Haley lost the primary in Nevada. The problem is Trump wasn't on the ballot in the GOP primary in Nevada. The choices were Nikki Haley and none of these candidates. In other words, no one. Well, none of these candidates got more votes than Nikki Haley. She's going to continue into South Carolina, and she's going to drop out in South Carolina. Mexican President Obrador, who I like, put out a political platform, basically, and he did some nice thing. You know, he's putting out his platform for the election of the successor that he's probably handpicked, who is the former mayor, I believe, of Mexico City. It includes things like taking money out of politics, all this stuff. I would recommend looking at it. I like Obrador. I like his style. I'm going to miss him. Guatemala is talking about increasing or establishing commercial ties with China. I'm not sure this is how this is going to play out with America. Obviously, America, especially lately, has been very involved in Guatemalan politics. I believe, personally, that the last president was targeted by the United States because of his dealings with Russia and China, especially Russia during COVID. We'll see how that plays out. Bukele won the election in El Salvador in a landslide, and people in the United States are whining about it. He's so mean to the gangsters. He's so mean to the gangsters. He's so mean to MS-13. That's all they say. It's like ridiculous. Who buys this bullshit? There's some interesting things going on in Panama as well. A lot of interesting things going on. I don't propose to be a really understanding of Panamese politics, but here goes the story. Panama ex-president Ricardo Martinelli, Nicaragua granted him political asylum, but he's not being allowed to leave the embassy, last I heard. This guy was a good president in terms of economic development. I'm not sure why he's so hated. I'm not sure why. I believe, obviously, the United States must have something to do with this, and I'm not sure why. And because apparently he was a good president for economic development, but I don't pretend to know much. There's a lot going on in Panama. Panama could be a whole video into itself. I need to read more about it. Colombian president government, they announced peace process with one of the remaining revolutionary rebel groups in Colombia. There's only a few left. Malay kisses Israel's ass. What else is new? This was interesting. This is not a huge story, but I guess there is ongoing court case relating to foreign ownership of land in Brazil. Now, that's been a big issue historically all over Latin America because at various times in the history of Latin American politics, there's been a lot of foreign influence and foreign ownership of land, and it's amounted to exploitation of those countries. So this is a sensitive issue. I guess this involves a paper processing company, so they have lots. They've owned lots of land, of trees, and all this. Carnival has started in Brazil, and you know I'm not a fan of AP at all, but they have lots of nice pictures in here. I don't know why it's all fucked up, but yeah, Carnival is going on. Looks like a bang up time. 200,000 foreigners there, lots of beautiful women, I'm sure, lots of good music, lots of drugs, they say. I mean, look at this. So anyway, there's that. Carnival in Brazil. Let's go to Africa. What's going on in Africa? EU is pissed off at Zimbabwe. There's an arms embargo that's ongoing. It's been going on for 13 years. Okay. Chinese firms agreed to raise investment. There was basically a dispute between China and Congo, and Congo demanded more share in the Chinese investments in their land, and China gave it to them to some degree. As this M23 in Eastern Congo, they're kind of on the rise over there. They're basically a proxy of Rwanda. Ethiopia, the dispute in Ethiopia between Ethiopia and Somaliland is ongoing. Basically, Ethiopia wants to recognize this area of Somalia, which is essentially independent from Mogadishu, and they want to build a port there. Now, let's not forget, Ethiopia is a BRICS country now, and they align more closely with Russia than the West, and a lot of effort has been made to keep Ethiopia landlocked. Let's just put it that way. And it has a lot of potential as an economy. Actually, one of the highest potentials of any African economy. So there's going to be a lot of shenanigans over Ethiopia. Sudan and Iran, military cooperation. Let's not forget there's basically a civil war going on there between the Fast Reaction Force and the Sudanese government. Let's see, Moody's downgrades Niger. That's economic warfare, basically. But another while we're still in Africa, and then I want to get to another interesting one. So in Senegal, there's some interesting stuff going on. So we've had this rash of basically anti-colonialist revolutions across this region, which is the Sahel region of Africa. Looks like next on the list is going to be Senegal. They have a president there. His term is expired. He is a favorite of France and Europe and the West. But he hasn't had a chance to pick a successor yet. And because of that, he refuses to allow elections to take place. And this is starting to cause a lot of civil unrest in Senegal. So it seems to have a lot of the flavor of what happened in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso and Guinea. So this may be the next country on the list that is going to basically go on an anti-colonialist revolution, because that's what these are. These military coups are essentially anti-colonialist revolutions, and we'll see what happens, because Senegal is an important colony insofar as an important colony. It is an important colony, an important country to France. It's considered one of the most stable democracies in Africa, and there's probably a lot of investment there, and so we have to see what's going to happen here. This could get ugly. That's my opinion. Massacre, genocide in Gaza continues. Importantly, and this is an ongoing story, so Israel was talking. Israel has basically pushed all of the Palestinians out of their homes, essentially, and they're living down here in the city of Rafah, right on the Egyptian border. Egypt is not letting them in, because they know that if they let the Palestinians in, Israel's never going to let them back into Gaza. Egypt, with all of its problems right now, does not want and probably couldn't handle 2 million refugees living in the desert in Sinai. It's ridiculous that the United States even supported that in the first place, and they're still trying to do it. Israel has pushed all of the Gazans down here to Rafah. There's literally a tent city down here of epic proportions. I saw videos of just somewhere, I think over here, all of this empty land. It's like full of tents now. There's like 1 million people in this like area, you know, around Rafah, just in this area alone. And Israel is talking about attacking Rafah with all of these refugees there. That would be an absolute disaster. Well, interestingly enough, I just saw a news story today where it seems like the United States is finally putting their foot down and saying, and being more forceful, basically, and saying, no, Israel, we don't want you to do that. They're keeping it rather quiet as far as I can tell, but I think there's the strongest pressure we've seen yet from the United States on the Israeli government, telling them, no, we're not going to approve of this. But I have my doubts whether Israel's going to listen, and if Israel goes through with it, it'll be a massive catastrophe. It's already a massive catastrophe. It will be a catastrophe of historic proportions. But I think they might do it. I think it's about a 50-50 chance. And how would the United States respond? They'll wag their finger at Israel and continue to give them money. That's what they'll do. So this is a developing story. Egypt has said, don't you dare attack Rafah. We may attack you. Very tense situation. This may be the tensest situation right now in Gaza. For all I know, having not looked at the news or anything for like an hour at this point, this could have already blown up. I don't know what's going on as far as in the last day. This is on a minute-by-minute basis. Now, also with Israel, what was this one about? Okay, this is just links I have, one to Haaretz and one to Al Jazeera, so you can have like both sides of the story type of thing. Haaretz has a paywall from hell, but you can go to the archive site and get past that. Jerusalem. Yeah, what happened in Jerusalem? Okay, the Israeli defense minister, I believe it was defense minister, made a comment on Twitter about Biden having dementia. So that was funny. I think they erased it by now, but it's there. It's archived. Israel gets first ever credit downgrade due to prolonged conflict. So this is a big story. Moody's actually downgraded Israeli credit for the first time. It's the first time Israel has had a credit downgrade from anyone. So that's a big deal. That's going to have repercussions. Europe. Spain says they're not going to give Israel weapons anymore, for what it's worth. And the Spanish socialist prime minister, basically says he supports the two-state solution. So that's very cliche. Who cares? But he said he's not going to sell them whatever they're selling them, which probably isn't much, but it's something. It's optics. EU is kind of having cold feet regarding seizing Russian assets, which they should. I talked about this before. If the EU seizes those assets, that would destroy trust in the banking system in Europe and the United States, especially Europe, because that's where the assets were held. Who's going to want to put their assets in a European bank after they seized assets from Russia? I don't care who you are or what you think about what Russia is doing. You're not going to put your money in a bank that seizes their clients' funds for essentially political purposes. Whether you agree with those politics or not, it's going to make you think twice. Okay, this was a story from RT where apparently this is basically a recycling of a story from an Austrian newspaper. I guess the son or brother of Viktor Orban went on there and said, yeah, basically the EU blackmailed us into supporting Sweden or Finland or one of their NATO. No, they blackmailed Hungary into supporting the $50 billion to Ukraine, which will achieve nothing, by the way. Ukraine has a shakeup in its leadership. Finally, Zaluzhny is fired, and General Syrskyi is put on the top post. That's not going to change anything. Tucker Carlson interview right there. Iran Supreme Leader basically tells everybody we should embargo Israel. Well, that's a nice sentiment, but none of the Middle Eastern countries are going to do that. Baluchistan, random violence. Now, I was reading this article. I actually found this interesting. It's France 24, right? So there's that. But yeah, the elections in Pakistan happened, and I was just reading about it. This is a good article, I guess, as far as explaining somewhat what's going on with Pakistan's political situation. And apparently, the way they say it, it's basically a quasi-military dictatorship. Looks like the elections came out kind of mixed. There was no decisive leader. I believe former President Sharif, who was president for a long time, he's now going to be the president again, or prime minister. But he's going to have to form a coalition. And it seems like really everything's really controlled by the military there. Just based on this article. It makes sense. I don't pretend to know. Global rice shortage. So I've been reading about this for a while. There is a rice shortage. And India is a big part of that and really affected by that. This is going back to the assassination in Canada. So apparently India and Canada are still fighting each other over this situation that happened in British Columbia, I believe, or somewhere over there in Canada. And India says, hey, Canada, you have to give us evidence before we give you our evidence. So there's this whole game being played. Basically, Canada accused India of the Indian government a few months ago of directly being involved in the assassination of a Sikh separatist that now lives in Canada. That could be true. India denies it. So who knows? But Canada is also involving themselves in the separatist movement by harboring all of these separatists, these Sikh separatists. So Canada's engaging in shenanigans, and so is probably India. Vietnam, Philippines agree to prevent. So the Vietnam and Philippines have been having some discussions over the South China Sea. China isn't liking that, I'm sure. Vietnam is not necessarily friendly towards China, but they're not super hostile to China like the Philippines has been. Obviously, Vietnam isn't going to allow a bunch of U.S. military bases on their territory after what happened several decades ago. So there's that. So they're kind of neutral. They're not really siding with the United States, obviously, but they're not really, super friendly towards China either. They're kind of like neutral. Let's just put it that, lukewarm towards China. Whereas the Philippines, they got this guy Marcos Jr. and he's basically a puppet of the United States, it seems to me. This was an interesting story. Apparently Messi did a scrimmage or a game. So Messi's team, Inter Miami, that's from here in Miami, did a game with the Hong Kong Football Club, and apparently his performance was really bad, and he said he was hurt and just really didn't put a lot of effort into it. But then, like 2 days later, he goes to Japan, and it's like, oh, he's like super excited, super duper energetic, doesn't show any signs of an injury at all, as far as I can tell. Now, I didn't actually watch these games, so anybody correct me if I'm wrong. But the Chinese are calling bullshit on this, and a lot of people are upset. A lot of fans are upset. They're demanding their money back. So basically, it could be that Messi was doing this for political reasons. It wouldn't surprise me if he's been sucked into this sort of shit by political actors or even intel agencies. So there's that. The Chinese aren't too happy about it. It's kind of weird because according to how Global Times puts it, now this is essentially Chinese state media here we're talking about, but, apparently how they put it, he was just acting like a real bozo, not showing a lot of respect to the fans, many of which paid a lot of money to see that game. He apologized, I believe, but just the fact that he went to Japan like 2 days later and he was like really on it and really into it, it's a little strange. So I don't know what kind of injury works that way, where you go from zero to hero in a couple days. I don't know. But I mean, I'm sure, he's a professional athlete. He probably has injuries. But I don't know what's going on there. Beijing is basically talking to South Korea, saying, let's not be enemies. South Korea, Russian envoy, okay, well, whatever. It's just normal shit. And what happened down here? This is interesting. So there apparently a New Zealand pilot has been in captivity in the Indonesian province of Papua for a year now. So apparently he was kidnapped on a runway somewhere. He's like one of these bush pilots, basically. And the rebel group, there's a lot of problems in this area. The rebel group, all across Papua New Guinea, but especially in the western part, because the western part of this island falls under Indonesia. Basically, the Indonesians scooped it up because it has a lot of gold and a lot of copper. And some natives are not too happy about that. I guess it was a referendum in which they actually apparently the people actually chose to join Indonesia, but the referendum's very controversial. There's allegations of fraud, all that. And this pilot, who's from New Zealand, which really doesn't have anything to do with this directly, is being held prisoner by this rebel group. And the rebel group is demanding Indonesia make them independent before they release this New Zealand fighter pilot, bush pilot. So it's kind of a crazy situation. It's like New Zealand probably doesn't have much to do with this, but who knows? They definitely aren't directly involved. So they got a New Zealand citizen, and they're using him as leverage to get independence from Papua New Guinea or from Indonesia. So that's interesting. Interesting situation. I'm not sure how far they intend to get that way. And over here in Malaysia, this was an interesting story as well. Apparently, the top court in Malaysia has, so their version of the Supreme Court has negated Sharia law. I guess a lot of states of Malaysia has I guess the states have a lot of power, and they've been passing, the more Muslim aligned states have been passing a lot of Sharia law type stuff. And Indonesia, the Malaysian top court basically said, no, you can't do that. You can't have these Sharia laws. So I just thought that was interesting. It may have some implications in the future, maybe some sectarian issues. Malaysia already has sectarian issues, so this could further inflame some of the sectarian issues. Sri Lanka, what did I have here? Thailand and Sri Lanka signed free trade agreement. Okay. But what's interesting about Sri Lanka, and I didn't know about this until I was on the space, they have one of the world's most important deep water ports right around here, I guess. Okay. And somewhere over here. And why it's so important is that all of the sea lanes from China and elsewhere go basically like if you were to take a ship from Hong Kong to the Suez Canal, you would do something like this, I guess, and then go across and then go up into the Red Sea. So this is a very strategic location, and I was just clued into this on a space not too long ago that I guess this is one of the most strategic deep water ports in the world. So much shipping goes by here. The highest volume of shipping of anywhere in the world relies on this port. This is a stopping point for so many ships. It's right on the sea lane. So a lot of world powers are interested in Sri Lanka, and that has a lot to do with a lot of the political problems we've seen in Sri Lanka. So there's that. Let's go to the good US of A. What happened with this is, okay, here is a link to the oral arguments for the Colorado ballot case. I just found it very interesting. That's directly from the Supreme Court. What happened in the land of Satan? Biden can't be prosecuted. So this is a big deal. Basically, the special prosecutor for the DOJ that was investigating that situation in which Biden had a bunch of classified documents in his garage next to his Corvette. So there was a special prosecutor appointed, and apparently he was told you can't prosecute him. We're just making you do this, essentially so for optics, right? So it looks like, there's a fair process. And he was told under no circumstances are you going to recommend prosecution. So apparently this guy got pissed about it. And being the good bureaucrat that he is, he doesn't like being told by politicians, you're not going to, do something that, he's a bureaucrat, right? So he said, okay, I won't prosecute him, and I'm going to tell everybody why. And the reason why is he's too senile to stand trial. So that was a big deal. That happened right around, I think, the same day that the Putin interview was released. Really embarrassing. Biden is going to be replaced soon. I heard Michelle Obama, although Michelle has said she absolutely wants nothing to do with politics. So then it would be Gavin Newsom. Either way, Michelle Obama, I think, can win. Gavin Newsom can win. Because it doesn't matter who's the president at the end of the day. People just want somebody who looks how they want them to look, looks good like Gavin Newsom. I always thought Michelle Obama wasn't bad looking when she was younger, and she had a nice body and all that. That's just my opinion. I don't know. But call me whatever you want. She's not ugly, okay? I mean, it's not like I wouldn't date her or something. I'm not the most amazing looking guy myself. But anyway, I digress. Either one of them can absolutely win over Trump. At the end of the day, though, folks, the presidential election just doesn't matter. Putin talks about that in his interview as well, how U.S. policy has remained constant ever since Bill Clinton. And he said that he tried to reason with Bush, and Bush liked what he was saying, but then while he was talking to Bush, he said, bureaucrats came in and said, oh, no, we can't do that with Putin. So who's really in charge here? It's not the president. That's how it's supposed to be. And that's why the United States is not a democracy. Because the way the United States was designed to work is that the people decided who the president is. The people vote for the president. The president has to have absolute authority over the executive branch. Otherwise, the people don't have the control over the executive branch. It's just that simple. And the people haven't had authority over the executive branch since at least when Kennedy was assassinated, and maybe even a little before that. maybe the last president to really have control over the executive branch might have been FDR. I know Eisenhower complained about the CIA. Truman was an absolute buffoon. He got walked all over by British diplomats who started the Cold War for us. So, who cares? I'm so checked out of this election. I'm so checked out of American politics. There's no fixing a country where most of the people that go to vote don't know what the three branches of government even are. They have no idea how the government works. They have no idea what the job is of the people that they're going to put in official office. They have no idea. So there's no fixing a country when you have a population that stupid. It's just not going to happen. So good luck. For those of you who want to go virtue signal, look at me, I'm doing my civic duty, I'm going to go vote. You're wasting your fucking time, but I hope it makes you feel good. Anyway, I think we're pretty much done. Let's take a look at everything. What happened here in Ottawa, Canada? Oh, something to do with euthanasia. Yeah, Canada will not allow yet euthanasia for the mentally ill. So Canada's really going off the rails with this euthanasia thing. If they allow it for the mentally ill, that's going to be, I mean, I think most people would agree that's a bridge too far. Oh, I forgot about this one. I'm glad I didn't forget about this one. Sweden ends Nord Stream sabotage probe, hands evidence to Germany. So they did their probe. What they found, no one knows because they won't tell anybody. And they said, oh, we can't tell anybody because it's not our jurisdiction. We're going to give it to Germany. Germany is going to keep it secret because German people are sheep and they're not going to raise an issue. And basically, they're going to keep this issue mysterious, even though everybody knows who did it. Putin talked about that in his interview as well. So everybody knows who did this. But Germany is going to continue because they like looking like morons. They're going to hold on to that evidence and not tell anybody. Really, really, that's my country, by the way. Another country that I love and another country that I don't have a problem saying it's going down the wrong path, that they're acting like morons over there. Okay. So anyway, that is the video. I am out.